Welcome to the Real Estate Talk podcast with myself, Oliver Ingalls, and my esteemed co-host, as always, Benji Weinberger. If you learn anything from this podcast, if you take any tips or advice, we would love for you to like, share, and subscribe.
One deal going through that year. That was all I could see. And it was basically a very long email, polite email saying, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to pull out the sale.
Shit.
That was the moment I knew that potentially I wasn't going to be a journalist when I had to interview Arsene Wenger.
What?
One of my earliest lessons was trust. In that moment, everything changed.
Fuck.
Everything. Well, I was left to sort of try and resuscitate her on her floor.
We have the legendary Serge Cowan.
So Serge is the first official agent to have sold properties in 26 locations globally. He has sold a villa in Saint-Jean-Cap-Ferrat at 20 million euros, and he is currently marketing homes in the Bahamas, Spain, BVI, and South Africa, to name just a few.
He also launched the Chelsea TV, but mainly we get to hear about how parents' worst nightmare shapes who he is today. Let's get into it. Serge, first of all, thank you ever so much for joining us today. I'm not going to make this awkward, but I had a dream about this last night. I literally had a dream about this podcast.
What did you dream?
We were talking about the podcast, and I've been so excited for this one. And I literally just last night had a dream about it. Don't worry, we weren't naked or anything like that. There was nothing weird.
Damn.
No, Serge, honestly, thank you very much for having us.
It's a pleasure. Pleasure to be here.
So what we'd like to do, obviously, on our podcast is literally start from the start, go back and rewind your career and your whole life.
This is your life, right?
This is your life. So look, we're going to start literally back when you were like 10 years old. Let's go back to Serge at 10 years old. Tell us where it all began, why you used to go to school. Let's go.
Didn't realize this was a therapy session. I was at school in Northwood in Middlesex, St John's Wood. We were brought up in a public school background. I then went from there to Aldenham, which was not necessarily sort of the most exclusive private school back in those days. I was quite shy, to be honest. I always had a sort of passion for writing growing up. In fact, when I was 13, I got into theatre school.
Nice.
Sylvia Young Theatre School in London for my singing. I won't be singing today, don't worry about that. But they just told me at the time, if you're going to join, you're going to need to brush up on your dancing, which meant going in on a Saturday. And
Right.
I was like, but I'd like to go to Chelsea on a Saturday. So
Yeah.
I chose Chelsea. So that was the end of that career. So
So you could have been on the stage. We could have been talking to you as a world famous movie actor.
yeah, I always wanted to be seen.
Yeah.
I was always like to be center of attention.
Yeah.
Call it vanity or just call it insanity. I'm not too sure. But
Yeah.
for me, it was always about wanting to make a difference in certain sectors. And that's when I decided to go into broadcasting and
Yeah.
journalism and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I went and did some work experience at the Hendon Times through a family member. And then I started going to games with a sort of a great uncle. He was a weird guy, great uncle. It was the old fashioned hacks in the days. So they were like all wear their hats, and they were working for the newspaper called The Sporting Life. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No.
So they were all like Mail on Sunday, Sporting Life, and they would literally go to the pub for 6 days of the week and then write their articles for the Sunday paper. And that would be their world. And obviously on a Saturday, we would go and sit and watch games.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
So I remember my first game being Chelsea Spurs.
Ooh,
and
Good
Big
first
one.
game.
yeah, I was sitting in the sort of press box, and I remember John Terry making his debut.
Oh, wow.
He played up front actually on his debut, which was really
What?
weird. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, he was only like 17 or 18 at the time. So that was what my sort of first experience of it. And then
Yeah.
I would literally do that with the Sporting Life for a bit, just shadowing people. And then I managed to get a role at Capital Gold Sport. And I was like a junior runner there, and I was doing reporting and editing and that sort of thing when reels were reels. Like you had 2 reels and you'd have to cut them with a bit of tape and stick it together and that sort of thing. And it wasn't like use
the reels nowadays.
yeah, it was a real reel. And yeah, it was an amazing experience. And I would be working with Jonathan Pierce, Rob Watson, Steve Wilson, Julian Warwick, Adrian Durham, you know,
back in the early start,
when they were starting their careers.
Yeah.
But then, you know, and then I basically got a university place at Nottingham Trent to study broadcasting journalism.
Okay.
Which was run by the BBC. And in between all that, I was still working at Capital Gold. And then that was the moment I knew that potentially I wasn't going to be a journalist when I had to interview Arsene Wenger.
What?
Yeah.
So hold on. How old were you then at this time?
I was
you
about
were
18.
18 years old. You've been doing some work experience.
Yeah. So it's 96, just after he signed.
Yeah.
For Arsenal.
Yeah.
So he was new.
Yeah.
And no one really knew what he was.
Yeah.
I knew pretty quickly what he was because I went to London Colney to do an interview. They said, right, go and get an interview with this new manager. And
wow.
Like,
so they let you do that?
Yeah, so they gave me the pack and I went out like doing my Vox Pops.
Yeah.
And I went into the car park at London Colney and I literally went up to Wenger and said, can we have a chat about, I can't remember the game, maybe Sheffield Wednesday or something like that, a big game, the weekend. And I froze. I froze. He was so intimidating. I looked at him. He was like, he's a really tall guy.
Yeah.
And I literally froze and he wasn't in a good mood. And I had to go back to the studio without an interview. And that was the point I knew that maybe I wasn't cut out or maybe my confidence wasn't quite there yet.
Yeah.
And I had to take a step back. Even though I went on and did my broadcasting degree and got a 2-1 in broadcasting journalism, I then realized that it wasn't necessarily the right path for me. So I went into PR and did Sky Sports and worked in PR where I would chaperone around Lennox Lewis and all these other sort of celebrities and just amazing people. We'd launch the Ashes on Sky. We'd do the Premier League and we'd just do all the PR and promotion in the newspapers.
Yeah.
London Monarchs, don't you remember the American football team and all that? It was just an amazing experience.
Do you think that that Arsene Wenger experience hindered like your thought process and your career in the early stages? You know, did that hold you back? Did that really knock your confidence?
I was brought up in a very traditional Northwest London world. I was always very much, I always loved cameras. I always loved technology. I always like using my hands. Don't get the wrong idea, but you know what I mean? And I always felt that, you know, I wanted to do something in that arena. Sorry, what was the question again?
No, so did that hinder your career in the early? Did that really knock your confidence?
Yeah,
you know, it's obviously something that you even now remember back to.
I had real imposter syndrome growing up. I think, you know, when I was at school at Aldenham, it was quite a feisty environment. Going up, being brought up in a what was probably a Christian school. We would have to go to chapel every day. Yeah, they'd expect you to get on your knees, even though you weren't. Sorry. They would expect you to pray. Yep. To a God that you didn't necessarily believe in, and there was a lot of that back then, and there was a lot of anti-Semitism at the school. Yeah. Which did shape me. Yeah. I got suspended from school for sticking up for myself. Let's put it that way. But
what happened?
I would always call myself quite entrepreneurial at school because I didn't always agree with everything that was going on. I didn't like the system sort of thing. So I just something upset me and I provoked a fight. I didn't actually get involved in the fight. I instigated the fight and the fight took place. Someone got badly hurt. And because I was meant to be in charge, I was the one. It's like being the manager. Yeah. You take responsibility, right? You have to hold your head up high. I mean, but I was a good sportsman. I don't know if you know, ever heard of the Victor Delorum, which is like it's winning all the sport events. I would take all that on board, and I would run middle distance and win everything, and eat without. But I didn't apply myself. Yeah, and that's why it frustrates me to watch my children today. to a certain degree.
So did you enjoy school and
No.
university?
I enjoyed university, but I enjoyed everything for the extracurricular.
Interesting.
Everything was about sport.
No,
Winning.
no. Drugs and alcohol and having a good time.
Because that's what that extracurricular then
Yeah.
meant. You used to do the football.
Yeah, if I could have been a county runner,
Yeah.
for example, but
Yeah.
I chose recreational activities and
yeah.
going to the Dome in Tufnell Park to headbang and you know, be a grunge head to Pearl Jam, and that was all my music in those days. I was like, I would wear my DMs and my t-shirt and Pearl Jam t-shirt and Rage Against the Machine and just crowd surf and have a good time. But I don't regret it. Yeah, to a certain degree. I think what I found was that I wasn't always what my dad wanted me to sort of focus on. You know, he was paying for my private education, so he wanted me to get a private education, which meant even when I got to lower sixth at Aldenham, I decided that I wanted to go and do media studies. So I left, you know, and went into, I started my year again. My regret back then, which I think leads to where I am today, was I never traveled. All my mates took a year out. Yeah, I didn't. I was so focused, but also that Northwest London pressure, which I'm sure Benji can relate to, of like, oh, you settle down, get yourself a wife, get yourself married. And it all came really quickly to me, to the point where my grandma gave me her engagement ring and told me to go and get married. So I didn't have a choice then, did I? That excuse was out the window.
And that look, when you're such a young age and you've got the pressure of your mum and dad, you know, you've got the pressure of your culture, you know, in saying getting married, trying to find a wife, you know, someone for the future. You know, you've got the pressure of school, which again, you know your mum and dad are paying for. Yeah. How does that really affect you actually as a young person? Do you think part of the going out and drinking is not rebelling against it, but needing some type of release?
Yeah, it was a complete rebellion. But then, you know, when the day I got home from university, my dad turned around to me and said, right, when are you going to start paying your rent? And I was like, what? Rent? You know, we like the kids today don't really necessarily have an understanding of what a gift is. So you go onto Amazon and, you know, they just order something. Like I had to wait for my birthday. I remember going out and going to Hamleys and he'd buy me a Scare Electrics probably at the age of 10. And he, you know, it was 4 days before my birthday and he would put it in the highest place in the house and he wouldn't let me have it until my birthday. Love that. You know, there's instant gratification nowadays. There's no understanding of that. And I think that was a big lesson for me, was learning, you know, the day I left university, that I had to actually start to work and earn money, and money became obsessional. Northwest London culture is very, very money led, especially in the Jewish sector.
Keeping up with the Joneses.
Correct. And I think that led to a level of envy from my perspective.
And do you think the rebellion that you went through because of perhaps what your parents wanted you to be, has that shaped your viewpoint of how you are with your kids?
Yeah, I'm trying to be complete opposite. I mean, you know, my mum hasn't been around for about 18 years now, but my dad, very much so. My dad wasn't really around. You know, he was working. He was always working, and I didn't. You know, I always talk about, you know, but he was around for holidays. You know, we would live for the holidays. Back then, when you wanted to make a call on holiday, you had to use the hotel phone. So he had his own business. He would manufacture lever arch files and document wallets. Had his massive factory, and he would make that call once a week. It cost him a fortune from the hotel, obviously. But today, I'm in this world where I can't switch off. Yeah, and I've been like that since I set up my old company. I literally every holiday I'm on the phone. Everything's work related, and I try and switch off, and it's a really difficult job to do as a parent. Yeah. And I'm sure you can appreciate that. Yeah. And please God, by you. And
look, we'll come on to that. Benj, I just wanted to ask you as well, like, you obviously grown up as well in Northwest London, you know, Jewish culture. Did you feel the same pressure? I mean, there's 15, 20 years difference between Serge and
I think you're
Benji?
being
Is
kind to me, to be
Is
honest.
that right? 20 years. What is it? Is it 20?
How old are you?
I'm 50 this year.
Yeah.
Ooh,
So
big
back,
five.
back
Yeah, 20 years.
about 20 years.
20 years, yeah.
Did you feel the same pressures growing up?
Yeah.
It's funny that
yeah.
it's never changed. It's funny it's never gone.
Yeah.
It's very much the normal route of a Jewish person in North London, whereby you go to school, you go to university, probably the same. We call them Junies, Leeds, Nottingham, Birmingham, because they're all, only an hour or two away from London, and most of them go home on the weekends. Then you find a partner, get married, have kids. It's just that journey that you go through. And in theory, I'm fortunate that my parents and my in-laws have been quite chilled about it. I was with Talia for 10 years before we got married. But most, grandparents, as Serge mentioned, or parents will be putting pressure on their kids. When you're getting married, when you're having kids. And it is very much keeping up with, the Joneses and what your friends are doing and what your neighbors doing. And it can be difficult.
Yeah. I think there's this perception in the sort of the Jewish circles where everyone has this big house. And I think some people have a lot of people are wealthy and have a big house, but then there's people like my dad who maybe financed a bit more than they could chew. Yeah. And now he's reaping that. We were brought up in a finance culture. Mortgages were everything. I remember Tony Blair, mortgages were almost like 0%, when he came in. And my dad would be like buying properties up in York, left, right, and center. And I was like, because his business, he lost his business after basically Viking came around. I don't know if you heard of Viking. Viking, that's even madder. So Viking were like a mail order company like WH Smith's, and you would literally buy all your stationery through them. Before that, you would order it through. It's a bit like the Office, the famous Office, the paper merchants and stuff. That was like my dad's company basically, nice. But he had the factory. So when that all ended and Viking ended, a lot of people, he had to find other things to do. Yeah. So what did he do? He went into property because it was cheap. Yeah. It was cheap. Yeah. You could buy a property up north for 10 grand and rent it. And if you had enough of them, it would all balance out. It was crazy. Yeah. And now the rates are like they are. Yeah. He's feeling a very different situation.
Yeah, pinch again. Yeah.
And I always felt that. And I suppose in a way, the other pressure I had was knowing that at some point I'd have to get the big family home, and really sort of do that. And I think I was going down that route. But my ambition when I set up the company was to travel and pretty much do what I do today. Yeah. But then things happened.
So let's rewind then. So let's get back onto track. So you did all your broadcasting, you went to university, you got your 2-1. University finishes, the next day you're back at home. Yeah. What was the next step?
Sky Sports PR.
Wicked.
And then basically, as I said, for 2 or 3 years I was working there. Yeah. A guy called Raymond Jaffe, who owns the Promotion Factory in London, got me the job. And basically I worked under a guy called Chris Haynes, who ran basically Sky Sports PR. Yeah. And anything that came onto the TV, we would have to push, whether it was the presenters, whether it was the sports themselves. So I would work with Kirsty Gallagher, Helen Chamberlain, Tim Lovejoy.
Yeah, nice.
What was that program called? Soccer AM.
Yeah. Oh, so I would be, and I would also be in the studios on a Saturday afternoon when they would have all the feeds in the studio. Yeah. And we would be on duty. Interesting segue. I have to tell you this story. So one of my jobs was to keep an eye on the pundits. Right. Now, back then, we had, obviously, besides Letizia and all that lot, we had a certain George Best. Okay. Who would be one of the pundits. Yep. The problem was, on a Saturday afternoon, he tended to disappear. Yeah. So they would get him into the studio, and if he survived the 3 hours, we would get him online. So my job that 1 week was to keep him in the studio.
Just keep him in
and I literally turned my back for a minute, and I saw him running down the road to the nearest pub he could find, basically. And but they had to get a replacement, basically. That was the sort of the situation. That was part of my job. But the thing, like with anything in our world, and even today, media was not well paid. You were privileged to be in media, and I wasn't making the money I wanted. So I thought, well, how can I develop this? And I got a job at Hill and Knowlton, which is a PR company. Hated it. Lasted 3 months. Left, and then got an opportunity to launch Chelsea TV, which was just cool. Marketing and that sort of thing. Being my club, it was a great experience. Met a lot of the players and had a bit of fun there. But it just, I wasn't fulfilled. I wasn't making money. Yeah. And then
can I ask a question? Was it money or was it the passion for it? You know, was it really that you really loved it?
I think I was like looking at it. It's a good question. I think I was looking at it and I just didn't think I was going to be good enough to be in sport. There was too many people. At the time, you had Sky Sports had just been launched, skysports.com, for example, and all the platforms. You had Sporting Life, you had Sportal, you had Football 365. And in the space of a week, Sky had so much power that they literally bought all of them and it became sport.
It's a monopoly.
Sky Sports.
Yep.
And that was the start of these sort of, and at the time they were buying up football clubs. I don't even remember there was media rights they were buying into. So they owned a part of Leeds Football Club, they owned a part of Chelsea, and their plan was to have all these football TV stations. Peter Ridsdale was a part of that. And, you know, there was all this sort of stuff going on in the background. And I don't know, maybe I became a bit disillusioned with it all. Yeah. You know, I just found that the whole circus of sport a bit of a circus, really. Yeah. So I didn't really know what I wanted. I think I was like a bit lost. Yeah. I think I felt a bit lost.
And how old were you at this age now then?
God, probably about 23. 22, okay. 23. Early 20s. So yeah, I graduated in 98. So then 2001, I was pretty much out of work. And my wife at the time basically said, you know, she was working in John D. Wood in St. John's Wood. Yeah. She said, you know, should we set up a business? And we were like, okay. And because I could use my marketing experience and knowledge, and she could push the property sales and rentals. And we went into renting property in Primrose Hill. And it was all right. We had a business partner. One of my earliest lessons was trust. Yeah. And within 3 months of employing or working with him, I found myself signing a lot of blank checks. Really? Didn't really question why I was signing them until I looked at the statements and it had like Mothercare on it. And he'd been using the checks I was signing to buy equipment for his newborn baby. So my very first job was to pretty much remove him from his position.
Wow. As a 23-year-old, just gone into a new sector. Yeah. You find your business partner, the person you meant to rely on and trust.
We did not have a clue.
Who was he? How did you know him?
He was working with my ex-wife, basically, in the sector again. You know, he was a realtor at the time. We call it realtor. Because we were so American. And then basically we did that. And then probably in 2000, we set up business in 2002. And then 2003, we went to a property exhibition in a place in the sun or whatever. And this lady called Dora Onofriou, who was working for a developer called Kanika in Cyprus, turned around to us and said, look, at the exhibition, she approached us and said, why don't you stick up your properties on our website, on your website? And we were like, well, why? Because, you know, we'll give you commission if you introduce buyers. So I'm like, okay, this is new. So we gave it a go. I literally would sit there and add them to find a property at the time, which is now Zoopla. Okay. And manually. Yeah. And
this platform was called Place in the Sun.
Place in the Sun is like an expo. It's a big expo, the same as a TV show. Yeah. So it was like they had an expo which was connected to the TV show. There was lots of exhibitions in those days. You would literally go, oh God, you're so young.
Well, no, because I think it's key for me to ask these questions because obviously our demographic of follow, you know, the people that watch us obviously are younger as well. Yeah. So if it's just good to get a clear picture effectively.
Yeah. So fine. Well, okay. So Place in the Sun, it was an exhibition. Yeah. There's many of them now. There's a luxury home show and all these other ones, but it was the original. Yeah. So they asked us to put the properties on their website. And we tried it and we did 4 or 5 sales in the first few months. We weren't talking a lot of money. We were talking 250,000 euros, but we were earning 5% fees on it.
Wow.
So hold on. So let me get it right. You had the properties.
Yeah. We were advertising the properties.
You were advertising the property for the agent.
Developer. They were
developer on this platform.
Yeah.
And then you were getting all the leads.
Find a property, which is now Zoopla, yeah. So we would literally stick it on Find a Property like you do nowadays. And I think we were using Rightmove back then as well.
Yeah.
And any leads we got, we would send them, and they converted them. A guy called Rob Pallister, I remember him.
Yeah. And so sold 5 in the first month, literally just by putting them on the portals.
Yeah.
All the leads came through, and you were selling then overseas properties.
Yeah, Cyprus was mad.
Cyprus properties.
Southern Cyprus. It'd just gone into the euro. Well, it was already in the euro, but they just changed the currency from the Cyprus pound in 2002 to the euro. So it was all part of that transition process. And they were always offering tax benefits to other countries and that sort of thing. I mean, a lot of stuff we see today in the sector. Every country is trying to offer their point of difference, I suppose, even though they're all in the euro.
Yeah.
So you would get the inquiries and you would then just pass them over to...
We would manage them to a certain degree. And then a year later, I was really, still not feeling it. So part of my upbringing, I was on the French, we had a small studio apartment on the French Riviera, in a location called Californie, which is just above Cannes. It was the California of Cannes, basically. And if you can't be more luxurious, then and it was a small studio apartment, probably no bigger than this room, and we would convert the beds at night into in the morning to sofas, and it was 3, me, my brother and my sister, and my mum and my dad, and we would just spend summer months on the French Riviera. And then basically one summer, but by the time we were adults, we would go as kids or as partners and with our children and whatever, and we would use it certain allocated weeks. So there was always that thing going on in the background, which I never really saw was my thing, right?
Your calling.
And then I just decided one holiday just to walk into a company called Michael Zingraf, who are based on the Croisette next to Dior, and said to them, again, what are you doing with your properties? Who are marketing them within the UK? They're now part of Christie's, just so you know.
Okay.
And they were like, well, we don't collaborate. And I said, well, what is collaboration? I didn't really know what it was. I said, well, look, you give me a percentage of your fees, and if I introduce a buyer, we'll give you, it was common sense. And they gave us a portfolio probably worth $1 billion.
Wow. Just from walking in?
Just from an XML,
So you're in your office with your wife at the time, and you've just made X amount of money from selling the properties in Cyprus. Are you then sitting down thinking, okay, this is a really big opportunity for us, moving away from rental properties in Primrose Hill?
Yeah, sort of. I was still quite immature.
Okay, so there wasn't like a light bulb moment thinking...
I wasn't working hard. I think I needed to be pushed. And I think when money became short, that's where I realized I had to turn it up a gear. And that was the story of my life in a way. I think every time I felt there was a bit of a struggle, I had to just turn it up a notch. Joining DDRE, I had to turn it up a notch again, but I had to reset my whole life. So it was like, this was a big moment. Doing that was a moment. I think I realized on the back of the French Riviera and the office that we had in Spain, it was the same. So we all of a sudden saying, right, we're going to concentrate on properties above 500,000 euros. At the time, that was quite a lot of money, right? It's like, what? But property average sale price was 1.8 million, sort of in 2009, 2007, 2008. Before then, world just changes like that, and not just because of the financial crisis, but personal reasons and just the world. The journey that you think you're on, just falls apart. And you the way I describe it sometimes, if you're playing a game of poker, you dealt a hand. It's how you play that hand. Or if you're driving down a road and you've got a roadblock, you do turn left or you do turn right. It's something that you can't, it's not something you choose, it's something that just happens.
Super interesting. So look, you go into that agency, They give you a portfolio. Say, yep, Serge, you know what? You can go and promote my properties in the UK. If we introduce any buyer, we'll give you X amount commission, billion pound portfolio.
Yeah.
You come back to the UK off your holiday.
Yeah.
You put them all onto that portal.
Yeah.
What happens?
We start getting inquiries and we start getting a lot of wealthy people. But back then you didn't have compliance checks and all that sort of thing. So you didn't really know who you were dealing with. It was all very dodgy.
Yeah.
And we grew a portfolio of sales. I think, we were, as I said, we were selling properties. I think back then, probably the biggest sale would have been about 7 or 8 million.
Yeah.
Probably to a Russian buying in Cap Ferrat or something like that.
Yeah.
And I started growing this sort of sales portfolio around the world, which I didn't even sort of respect at the time.
But so was that because then you saw the success you'd had by going into that agency and getting their portfolio, and then what, you started to go around the globe?
We started speaking to different agents locally,
and
basically saying we will be your international office, and we will market the properties.
Yeah, makes sense.
And it was a simple process. As I said, we would take we would ask them to produce what we called an XML feed of their portfolio, which is basically an Excel spreadsheet, and we could then plug it into our website in the back end and create, and it would publish all the properties, and it would update overnight. So we'd have these feeds running every day. So I had my own factory in a way.
Wow.
And online factory.
Why could these agents not advertise themselves? Because you were essentially just a middleman.
Because the way search engines worked in those days, they were very regionalized. You had code.co.uk. So you wouldn't necessarily have properties being seen from google.fr on .co.uk. So we would spend a lot of money, like people do nowadays. I don't, but a lot of people do nowadays on social media, paid ads. We would spend a lot of money on organic searches on Google. So properties for sale in Spain, but I would
SEO stuff.
But I would break it down deep. I would go properties for sale in Haute Saint Paul or Mougins village, and really break it down, because people who were searching for wealth were looking in specific roads and locations. But then when you break it down to roads and locations, the price of SEO goes up dramatically.
Yeah.
And then you'd probably do a search check and there'll probably be 2 or 3 people searching a month.
Yeah.
But to me, that was gold dust, because those 2 or 3 people were my customers.
Big ticket.
They were buyers.
Yeah. So we would really focus on that element of the marketing. So my marketing, I looked at my website as my shop front on the internet superhighway.
Nice.
Basically.
Nice.
That's how I called it.
So, and do you think, I know we're going to come on to where you are now and the things that you're doing on socials, which are amazing. Do you think it was harder or easier then in terms of SEO and buying a road name?
Compare it to the Adidas trainers coming back into fashion at the moment. It's exactly the same. Everything comes full circle.
Cyclical. Yeah.
Everything comes full circle. The SEO equivalent now is what's going on social media. The Google SEO. It was the only option people had. I would pay like 2-3 grand a month on AdWords and I wouldn't get anything. And what I realized after spending that money is I'd spent the money. What I'd realized that, and I didn't get anything back. Yeah, but you have to speculate to accumulate. But what I realized was that, people don't trust adverts, and they prefer organic. And I do always believe that. And anyone who turns around to me and says different is either trying to sell AdWords or trying to...
When I go on Google, I purposely scroll down to get away from the ads, because it's not what I've asked for.
Yeah, and that was the way it worked originally, because that was what people were used to. Google introduced AdWords.
Wow.
People were like, what is AdWords, And you would click on it and it'd be completely irrelevant. And then obviously they made it harder for you. The same rules with what Facebook had with data protection had to be introduced. So everything's repeating itself. They were just everyone's trying to reinvent the wheel the whole time. And that's what's happening in the industry as a whole around the world at the moment. Everyone's trying to reinvent the wheel. I always give the example of purple bricks when I'm talking about international property now, because purple bricks came in, they reinvented the wheel. It didn't work. They made a lot of money in the process, and then we're all back to where we were before.
Yeah. So how long did that last? Did this business last then?
Business is still going.
Yeah. But
it's the marriage that didn't last.
Okay. So, well, tell us about that. I mean, obviously, look. So you had kids. You had kids young.
Yes. Look, we were trying for our first child for 5 years. You know, that was mental more than physical. We knew that. Without going into too much detail on that. But then, as I said, life can change with a click of a finger, literally, and it did.
Wow.
You know, we had a normal sort of pregnancy, everything was fine, and then my eldest daughter was born starved of oxygen, with an infection, and it led to her cerebral palsy, basically. And that was in 2007, and that was 2 years before the world collapsed, literally collapsed. And that was a hard time. I'd just taken on a property, the property, which was the family home, and I had a mortgage up to the eyeballs. And I was struggling. I was literally down to my last pound.
Wow.
Had to get a loan from my father and father-in-law at the time, and I literally, we scraped by. But we had this added pressure of my ex-wife didn't come back into the business. So I had a big business. I had like 9 or 10 people working for me. And I was just in over my head. And I remember I had one deal going through. I think I was speaking to my partner about this the other day, 2011, around that time. One deal going through that year. That was all I could see. And it was a big one. It was 6 million. And it was in Spain. And I remember waking up one morning and I just basically received an email into my inbox, and it was from my partner who'd received an email from the guy who was buying the properties. And it was basically a very long email, polite email saying, "I'm sorry, I'm going to have to pull out the sale."
Shit.
And the reason being, it's fucking horrendous because it in comparison to what happened, you just can't write it. But the Japanese earthquake of 2000, I think it was 11 or 12, I can't remember the exact date. There was a massive Japan earthquake. I remember seeing the videos of the waters just flying across. And obviously thousands of people were killed, and it was horrendous. And from a selfish perspective, all I cared about was the fact that I was getting no money. Cool. And it was in a direct result of that Japan earthquake, because the guy who was buying the property had money in the Fukushima plant.
Right.
So in terms of, he had money in uranium or whatever, and it crashed overnight and he couldn't buy the property.
So what's the first thing you're thinking when you're reading that email? The first thing that came to your head?
First time ever, I left my mobile, got up from my desk and walked. And I remember walking for like 2 or 3 hours.
Wow. What was going through your head?
Not a lot. Because you're dealing with a child that's got cerebral palsy. You're then dealing with my mum who'd just been diagnosed with lung cancer. And you're going through this sort of hell.
Yeah.
And others would have taken more, and I'm in debt. And I'm in debt. And I'm thinking, what the fuck is this worth? Is it worth the time? Is it worth the effort? So obviously your instant reaction is to give up, just to say, I'm not doing this anymore. I can't do this anymore, to run away. But I didn't. I fought hard, and we came round. We got a couple of deals. Some people call it luck, but you make your own luck. And we got a couple of deals and things turned.
So can I ask a question? You said you fought.
Yeah.
And that was the difference. What did you do to fight? Like, how's that mentality day by day? Because it's not just like, I'm going to fight for the next 1 year to make this work. What did you have to do in your own head to do that?
Stopped hiding behind my staff. Took a lead. And I think that was the big part. Rather than worrying about what was going to happen to my staff, and I worried about myself. I put myself first, put my family first. And maybe that was part of my undoing. When you have your own business, you've got to put yourself first.
So what do you mean you put your staff first originally?
Well, I didn't want to lose. I didn't want to let them go. I didn't want to have that tough conversation with people. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Cool.
I was just didn't want that. And in a way, they were helping me through very tough times. But it comes to a point, you know, where you just have to put yourself first.
Make tough decisions.
So, you know, and that was it. And then we were literally reduced to about three people. And I remember around 2015, just nailing it, doing a lot of big sales, having a lot of people. A guy called me, looking in Ibiza, who's selling his business for 50 million. And he said, I'm looking for a property, 7 million in Ibiza. And I nailed it. I got it. I had a client from Argentina, part of the Mendoza family, obviously wine. And she bought a property in Cap Ferrat for 19.8 million. And I brokered that sale, yeah.
Nice, well done.
Unfortunately,
You didn't get paid?
I only earned fees equivalent of about €1 million.
Only?
About that.
What do you mean only?
Well, no, as in the sale price of the property might as well be $1 million.
Yeah.
Because in the French market,
Yeah.
all sorts of people come out the woodwork. The
course.
classic line in the
Introduce,
France, the gardener needs to be paid. I said, there must be some rich fucking gardeners in the French Riviera.
Well, it's interesting to say, because one of the things that I've noticed about working with you, and I guess we'll come on to DDRE and how you just said that there's so many different introducers, and you've sold properties in 26 different countries in
Locations.
yeah, with so many different ways of how everything works. So you always strike me as someone as just always in control and like super calm.
So my partner that.
Yeah, super calm and very patient. And I guess, like, where do you think that comes from? Because you're dealing with so much stuff and you've been through so much stuff, and we'll kind of come onto it as well. Do you think because you've been through loads of different things, you kind of don't sweat the small stuff?
I just think, I think that's it. I think it's like, compared to the shit that I've had to deal with, this is a pretty small fry. It sounds rubbish, but you know, we are working in a lifestyle. Well, I'm working in a world of lifestyle. I'm sorting other people's lifestyles when I'm not probably sorting my own. It's like my hairdresser's bald, right? You know, we're sort of like, he's cutting my hair and making me look beautiful, but he can't grow a thing on his head.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that. It's, you know, I just feel that I'm here for this. Serge actually means servant, believe it or not, in a weird sort of way, to serve. And it can be Serge, Sergei, Sergio, Sergei. You know, all these different versions of it. So I've always had that sort of global aspiration, I think. And I think I believe that social media has given me the ability to literally be who I want to be. You know.
Okay, so let's go back. So everything's going well now, right? Going through that time, the tide has kind of turned.
Yeah.
You know, you're sat back. You're now doing some good deals. You've ridden out that hard, you know, that hard period. You can only see clear ahead, I presume.
Yeah.
What happens next?
It's like a question of sport. Okay, what happens next? So 2017, 21st of October 2007, my best friend's birthday. Go home, go to bed, no football on Sunday morning. And I wake up to screams from my wife at the time. And I just like bolt upright out of bed, run downstairs, and my eldest daughter, Madeline, is non-responsive in her bed. We had a room adapted downstairs. And in that moment, everything changed. Everything. We were then I was left to sort of try and resuscitate her on her floor. Any parent's worst nightmare. I can't tell you. It's horrendous. But it shaped me. It shaped me to who I am today. She passed away a day later. Basically, she had brain damage on her brain damage. She had a heart attack.
And
not
how old was she?
10.
10.
Yeah. So I was lucky. I've got 2 other children, 2 other girls from that marriage, and a little boy that was born last year for my craziness, but that's another story. And yeah, literally over a year, you go from running a business and being a full-time carer. Maddie couldn't use her arms, legs, or feed herself or talk, anything. We were getting into eye gaze at the time, which was being able to use her eyes to communicate and that sort of thing. But to go from that to nothing, it was like, holy shit. And yeah, it was just an eye-opening moment for anyone. It would be an eye-opening moment.
God, yeah,
it was, and we basically, I just realized that I wasn't happy. Wasn't happy in my marriage. I wasn't with my ex-wife for the right reasons. And we agreed to separate amicably to a year later, 2018. And then the process of getting divorced started, and the business, it took us 6 years to get divorced.
Right.
Everything was 50-50. I'm not going to go into the financials, but it cost me a bit more than it cost her.
Because she was part of your business as well, wasn't she?
Yeah. So I ended up leaving the business to her.
Yeah.
And that was into 2022, I think. COVID happened. During that whole process, I snapped my Achilles tendon, which didn't help because I used football as like my out release.
Yeah.
And
get that.
Yeah, that was hard. That was hard, not being able to play football.
So just going back to what I was saying in terms of that, I see you're someone who's like super patient, and you put things into perspective. Do you think, I mean, I can't imagine there's anything worse as a parent than, what you went through. Do you think that's one of the things that probably shaped you personally, but also in a business capacity as well?
I think empathy and understanding what grief is, because I didn't just experience grief as losing a child. I've experienced grief of losing 2 other children in a divorce. And then I realized grief doesn't just take one form of losing someone. It takes forms of life-altering conditions. We all are going to experience grief at different stages of our life. And then I realized that in property, we all suffer from grief and legacy homes. And, being at a home recently in Ibiza and having the father of the son who's looking to, sell the property, like saying, I don't want to sell the home. It's my life is here. My life is here. It was incredibly, incredibly difficult. And I think today, when you look at property, a lot of people don't appreciate that part of selling property. This is an emotional connection.
Well, I've got a quote that you put on
oh God,
online. My work as a global real estate advisor isn't just about transactions. It's about people connections and understanding what makes a home meaningful. Yeah. So I guess that's exactly that.
It's about family. It's about family. We all have our upbringings. Everyone in this room, we all understand that. But we've all had our own journeys, and we are dictating other people's journeys. In a way, it's like when I had my midlife crisis and I decided to become a DJ when I was 40. It was like I would be making those those 40th birthdays and those 50th birthdays I was DJing at. I was making an imprint in their lives. By a night to remember. That will be with them forever. It'll be with their kids forever. I still remember my mum and dad's 40th birthdays. Yeah. We are all in the role of helping with people's lifestyles. We can all talk about finances. We can all talk about money. We can all talk about rates. We can all talk about all this stuff, but ultimately it comes down to family. And when the property gets sold on, it goes to the family.
Yeah. It's really interesting because...
Except for if you've got stupid of inheritance. That's another story, yeah.
Well, yeah, look, I just want to say how inspiring your story is, because I think so many people would go through what you've gone through and probably would curl up in a ball and want the world to eat them up. But, being sat here where you are as the most amazing person, advisor, I think it's... inspirational and motivational of kind of where you've come from something so, difficult.
Well, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, I was going to say something else.
Go on.
I thank you, but part of the part of me you don't see is that bit underneath, the thick skin. It doesn't resonate, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's weird because I think when you've been through trauma or post-traumatic stress disorder or whatever you want to call it, you sort of things just dry up. Like when you close it, I compare it to closing a deal. You every deal is a new book, a new chapter. Every deal is a new chapter in my book, right? Every story is different. You get to the end of it and you're like, you can't even celebrate a deal now until the money's actually in the account, right? Yeah. In your account.
Yeah. And then it goes so quickly.
Yeah, and it's like gone like a month later. That bloody overheads. Jesus. Tax. We have to pay tax. No one told me about the tax. Daniel didn't tell me about the tax. But it's an exhausting process, and I think life can be like that. And I suppose going back to after Maddie passed, and I was DJing, I bumped into a guy that I know. He was the videographer at the bar mitzvah I was DJing at, and I was doing the DJing, and he noticed the tattoo on my inner arm, and he was like, afterwards, he said, let's have a coffee, and we met up for a coffee at the V Works in the village in Centennial Park. You probably know it well.
Yep.
And he goes, tattoo, what does it say? It's Hebrew. And I said, it says my daughter's name. It's got Maddie May on it. And he was like, wow, okay, it's interesting. Anyway, he then took off his shirt and he revealed his tattoo, which had the name Madeline on his arm. And he lost his daughter Madeline 17 years earlier to undiagnosed leukemia.
Wow.
And we knew straight away that we had to do something about grief and men, because men and grief don't mix. We don't talk. We don't share. So we created the podcast, Men Do Talk.
Yeah, I was going to.
Which is basically an ode to our daughters, and we started just talking, getting on camera. And if you want to see all my real emotions, listen to that or watch that because we bottle it all up, and we have to become sort of like the sort of soothsayers, I suppose, in a way. We have to be the experts. We have to be the calm head. But I always find when you speak to somebody, there's always a connection. There's always a connection, a deep, connection. It can be anything. Oh, my Solly, my youngest, was born profoundly deaf. I met with a guy last week with Richard Lightwing from the company who was also deaf. We had an instant connection. We spoke. We were open about it. Everyone has a connection, and it doesn't always have to be about we know this person or that person. In this sort of world we live in, it can be something a bit more down to earth and real. Yeah.
Well, you must form deeper connections because of that.
Correct. I mean, when I sold a property to the head of 20th Century Fox at the time, and it all stemmed from, in a weird sort of way, my great uncle, a guy called Bill Saunders, was the head of 20th Century Fox in LA back in the 1980s. And we used to go there in the summers, and with all the cars parked up in the thing, and he would literally let me and my brother and my sister sit and watch movies and decide if we were going to release them to the cinemas or put them straight onto VHS. So it was the best job ever, and we would do that. And the guy I sold the property to in the French Riviera, I noticed his email address was 20th Century Fox. And I just basically asked him, I said, did you know my uncle? He goes, know him. He was my mentor.
No way.
Yeah. And instant connection.
Yeah.
And we've been friends ever since. I went, sit down, have a chat. He's almost like a mentor to me.
Yeah.
Right. So let's fast forward to what's your connection with DDRE? Because you're now here at the business. You obviously went through that period. Fast forward, you joined us a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Yes, it's 2 years in June.
2 years in June. Yeah. So how did that happen? Talk us through that.
So Daniel, Mr. Daggers, Super Prime, Lord Daggers, whatever he wants to be called. Mr. Super Prime?
Mr. Super, all of the above.
All the above.
Sir Daggers.
There was a Daniel Daggers before He was Mr. Daniel Daggers when he went to school in JFS, and my partner was in the same school year as him. And she, Lauren Plosker, and she basically, I said to, I saw I started watching him. I wasn't really into Instagram at the time and all that, and I saw these posts from this guy. I think we all had that feeling.
This
right?
guy, we'll just use the guy.
Yeah. And, sort of like, I don't, can't stand him because we wanted to be him, it's sort of like, couldn't say that out loud at the time, so yeah, the envy kicked in, right? And it was like, I want a piece of that.
Yeah.
I want a piece of that. And I think I did something that I'd never done before, which was I said, I approached him.
Yeah.
And I said, he launched DDRE Global.
Yeah.
I think it was around the sort of October before I joined.
Yeah.
Because it was Daniel Daggers real estate to begin with.
Yeah. And he launched this whole thing around global. And I went, I wonder who's doing his global.
Yeah.
And he eventually responded 6 months later. Very, very nice. No, it took a follow-up, but I understood he was busy, apparently.
Just playing hard to get.
Yeah. And we met, and I think I had him at Collaboration, and I think that was it. And we had each other at Collaboration, I think, because I'd always collaborated. The international property market was built for collaboration. The fees of 5% or 3% and 3%, it's built for collaboration. And I've always looked at it as, why are we not sharing the wealth? 40% of something is better than 100% of nothing, or whatever it is, and it just made sense. And looking at the nuances in the market and looking at the way my old company was sort of starting to struggle with the amount of people that were doing what we were doing, claiming to be an international office, listing the properties, helping the local agent cut corners. Were they actually doing the job properly? Probably not, but they were going for the cut corner option. I knew that maybe my old company has run its course. Yeah. And now it was time for a fresh start. And rather than working for the buyer, I wanted to work for everybody, but predominantly working for the seller. Because if you've got the seller on side, then the buyer will come naturally and you can create relationships. And by calling yourself a real estate advisor, you're not branding yourself with anything. You can work for both sides. Yeah. And it just made perfect sense to me. It just all clicked. Yeah. It didn't click immediately. Yeah. But it all just came together. And it was like, I get this now.
So you're currently marketing properties in the Bahamas, South Africa, Marbella Club, BVI. The list goes on. Recently sold something in Spain on top of the world, 10 million euros. Wow. Recently sold something with Jess in the Marbella Club.
8 million.
8 million. Yeah. Do you think working at DDRE has made your job easier?
Yes. It's made my job... When you're a small brand, you're always fighting to be the bigger brand. When you're part of a brand that is growing, you don't need to answer that part of the process. It just comes naturally. Yeah. I work under the DDRE license. Yeah. It just has a level of respect about it. It's harder for me because despite the TV show, we're not seen around the world like we'd like to think. People have seen the show. We sold on top of the world on the back of the TV show. They got in touch with us because they loved the show. Wicked. But that takes a certain type of person. The show isn't for everybody, right? Yeah. Ultimately. But it put us on the map. But there's still a lot of work to be done. The international market is in a bit of a, as I said earlier in the pod, it's in a bit of a transition stage at the moment. Everyone's trying to find a point of difference, and there will come a point where they all come full circle. I'd like to think that we are. I don't think we are ahead of the curve. We've already changed things to the point where we are seeing an instant response to it. Can I appreciate it? No. Does my anxiety still linger? Yes, because ultimately that's part of my makeup. I still always worry about the next deal, where it's coming from, where my next mandate's coming from, all the nuances in the market. But DDRE makes things easier for me, whether it's signing the mandates, getting the marketing done. I'm free.
And how are you finding it globally? Because here in London, we're obviously making an impact.
Yeah.
And after 5 years, people are realizing what we've done, what we're doing, and it's easier doing what we're doing because people are buying into it, the whole collaboration piece. We've worked on a few bits overseas, and I've seen how the same property can be marketed by several different agents with 5 different prices, which is just insane. Yeah, some owners don't even know who is marketing their properties, and you're obviously going into their territories and stepping on a lot of toes, saying, I will be your exclusive voice to the market. We've got tech that allows us to distribute your content globally. How are the local agents in the various different countries or territories taking
the local agents that matter understand, as far as I'm concerned. So I regularly speak to independent agents, mainly on the ground, advisors, ambassadors using ADVSR and other such tools. I'm constantly networking, and the more and more people I speak about, and you brushed on it before, this big problem at the moment with the multi-listing. It's not multi-listing. I think multi means 3, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This is like, what is this? This is a quadruple. I don't know what it is, right? It's crazy. I did a post the other week on LinkedIn. I found 35 agents advertising a 15 million euro property in Spain, all at the same price, but different sizes and whatnots. And it was a real problem for me. And I put it online, and I'm the only one who's speaking out about it at the moment. I literally am. I'm like a one-man band, but I've slowly started to see people coming in touch and saying, I can see that. I can see the problem. We can fix it. How are we going to fix it? It's not how it works here. Why is it not how it works here? Because people are trying to dictate the market, because they're throwing their money around and saying, this is how the market should work. If you go into the Marbella market at the moment, to give you an example, you've got 2 agents out there at the moment who are calling themselves listing agents, right? And what they do is basically they take the property, they do all the marketing, and they take a 2% fee for it, around that level. They then get allocated another 4% to get the property sold, to introduce by a buyer's introducer. All those buyer's introducers are doing are getting a Dropbox of the property details and then sticking it on their website and sticking it on the property portals. And that's the problem we're seeing on the market at the moment. Yeah. These companies are making a shed load of money at the moment.
Are they
from
doing
this tactic.
well?
Oh, they're doing volume.
They're doing well, but you're not going to sell a property. I think Daniel gave me this example the other week. I'll give him credit. He likes a bit of credit. He said, you don't go into, if you're going to buy a Rolex, you don't go into 15 stores. You go into one store and you find that Rolex. It's the same with property. You don't, nobody's going to buy that property if they see it advertised at 5 different prices by 15 different agents. They're just not going to buy it. Who are they going to trust? They might go into the brand, the established brand. But what they're not seeing with the established brand is any necessary networking per se. So if you ask, I always ask this to all the clients that get in touch with me, phone the established brand and ask them who is their contact in their New York office, who is their contact in the Miami office. Yeah. And I just leave them to do that and ponder for a couple of weeks, and then they'll come back and go like, hey, maybe you're right. And if they turn around to me and they say, look, we're not doing it on a sole agency, I will say, call me in 6 months. Yeah. Because I'm that confident they won't sell the property in that period. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Look, I think we spoke about on one of the podcasts is about educating people and educating clients and sellers. And I think actually once you've sat down with them for an hour, 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours, and actually educated them on the right route to market and a proper strategy, they sit down and go, oh yeah, that does make sense.
I don't think I fully appreciate before I joined DDRE the importance of a pitch. Yeah. And I've been mastering that. Yeah. I think. Yeah. And the more people I speak to, I'm adapting it, I'm adjusting it. Yeah. And I'm finally getting through to people. It's harder to sell to make the older generation understand it. I think the younger generation are getting it. But the point is me being of that older generation, I hate to say it, but you know, the people who are selling now were buying at my age, right? They're hitting their 70s now.
Yeah.
So I can relate to them, and the grey hair does help because they sort of see a grey hair guy on Instagram or whatever, and they're like, holy shit. And he's normal as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's
posting
about his kids all the time.
So we'll go on to quick fire questions in a minute.
Yeah.
But just,
is that quick fire questions?
Yeah, we've got some quick fire questions to wrap up. But you just touched on Instagram.
Yeah.
And again, your view and your tenacity with social media has been amazing to watch. Because I remember when you joined the business, you didn't have many followers. 200. And maybe. I remember
they were literally all my friends, and I only
and I remember so clearly you chewing the ear off of the marketing team, asking them creative ways, you know, how to grow your following. And now you're sat here with just shy of 13,000 followers on Instagram. I don't know what the question was, to be honest with you, but
how did you do it?
What advice? Because I mean, even for me, right? It's something that I'm trying to do. I'm on 8,000. For someone who's trying to grow their socials, starting from literally nothing.
One other thing that I've really done since I joined DDRE, really coming out of my comfort zone, and the DJing helped that, because when you're DJing in front of 150 people, you're out your comfort zone, right? And then you get on the mic and you have to speak. When you throw yourself into a networking event, and you know, there's been some disastrous ones for me, and there's been some really amazing ones. You literally have to throw yourself into that lion's den, right? You have to go for it. And just, you know, I find that with my posts now. If you feel that it's sort of wrong, then just carry on doing it. I think the way I describe it to anyone who's joining DDRE, and I've spoken to Stephen and other people, it's very simple. It's how you perceive yourself is not how others perceive you.
Yeah, I love that. It's a really good
And it's like, you may see yourself, you may look at yourself in the mirror every day and say, mate, I'm so good looking. Congratulations.
Yeah, you do.
He does it. He's put his moisturizer on. And, you know, you do that, right? And I look at myself and I have this sort of level of imposter syndrome. And I'm like, you know, you messaged me last week and you said, oh my God, you're so natural on camera. And I was like, just come out of the fucking gym, mate. I mean, I was like, it's like a bloody state. I mean, but I really procrastinated over posting that video because I didn't like the way I looked.
Yeah.
And I thought, fuck it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people need to say, fuck it.
Yeah.
You know, and when I go to these networking events and I sit down and I speak to people and I'm like having a chat with them over a drink, I'm saying, why are you not on camera?
Yeah.
You're great.
Yeah.
You've got so much personality. Oh, well, you know, everyone's got an excuse.
Yeah, 100%.
Everyone's got an excuse. And I never believed it. And when Daniel said, get on camera, I was like, what? Really? I knew I had to.
Yeah.
And then you do it. And then you sort of stick a camera in the side of your car, and I interviewed my kids, or my daughter on the way to school, and then
it goes viral.
A minute later, I've had now hit 2 million views.
2 million views
on all her posts. Yeah.
Wow.
Which is amazing, because we speak a lot about, you know, growing digital channels, and there was an overarching piece of advice of that natural, raw, you know, and you as a person, you know, we don't just show nice properties and tell advice. It's actually, they want to know you. And I always say about me and Alfie, you know, and I get more likes and people loving it that I'm playing
kids
football
and
with
dogs,
them.
Isn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
Kids and pets.
But that epitomizes what we say with you and your daughters, you know, about you're a dad. You're driving to school, you know, on the school run. You're talking about
hormonal teenage daughters
with a boyfriend or whatever it may be, which is super real life, and people relate to it. And then suddenly you've got 2 million views.
As long as you make it relatable. And the thing I learned from those posts very early on is I was relating to parents who said, my God, my kids used to be like that, or are still like that.
Yeah.
I was relating to young adults who saying, oh my God, I remember being like that with my dad.
Yeah.
And I've got kids my daughter's age calling me every name under the sun.
Yeah.
Really?
I'm having to delete all the time. They're
Brilliant.
they're like properly just going at me. I mean, I had a couple today and I think that's really nasty.
Yeah.
We all get it.
It's like the school playground.
I got it.
You should read some of these things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just nuts.
Yeah.
But I keep it related to what I'm doing, which is property.
Yeah.
So keep it relatable. Fuck it. Just do it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
You just don't know what's going to hit.
The heading of our podcast,
like
this
that.
should be.
I like that.
You don't know. I love your football stuff because I think you're so obnoxious with it. Like,
Which stuff?
when you score a goal, you
Oh,
should
I
be
love
slowing it down,
Yeah.
doing a little bit of commentary on it. I think it would be hilarious.
Great idea.
There was that post you did, and I still think how you have not made that go viral.
Which one?
When you were doing the walkthrough and you hit the ball and it went curled into the top
yeah.
corner.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
How have you
First
not
take.
reposted that 15 times?
Don't think the owner likes me anymore.
You have to do
Maybe
it.
I
Brilliant.
should. Maybe I should.
You should be
I can't remember who. I think it was Dan, the guy who was filming it. He was like, "What the fuck have you just done?" Like first take, he was so impressed.
I would love to see the BTS. If there was someone else filming
I
that,
know.
and then like behind the
That would've been
goal,
brilliant.
you want to get the
I'm
behind
gonna
the
watch that
goal
again later.
footage. You got to watch it again.
But it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
You know, you think something is going to go viral, and you get like 1,000 views.
yeah.
And then suddenly do
It's
something
just-
natural.
You've got
you
to
get
just
loads.
get back on it and carry on.
But ultimately, it comes down to one thing, and it's that one person. And it's not always the golden egg for me. Isn't the buyer? I don't think the buyer comes through as much as people like to perceive it does. I may be wrong because I haven't actually seen physical evidence of it yet. Being a journalist, I'm a cynical old bastard, and I'm like, yeah, it's not that work. But what I do realise from the sale of On Top of the World, as I posted the other day, the buyer came via someone, an agent who saw my story.
Yeah, there we go.
And then
Wicked.
they went and knocked on the front door and try and cut me out. So that justified A, sole agency.
Yep.
It justified B, you can't trust anyone. And D,
C, digital
I don't want that. I mean, there's so many justifications for the reason that we needed to do things that way.
Right.
Right, quick fire questions.
Quick fire. Should we do two
Hashtag,
each?
hashtag QFQ. If you have questions, make
Nice.
sure you
Wow.
message us on
Let's do
at
it.
the Real Estate Talk podcast.
Okay, so mate, quick fire.
We've got 3 minutes left, so
You've
we've
literally
got
got, yeah.
go
So
for it.
right, okay. The biggest red flag you've seen in an international deal?
There was a deal that I did where the money hit the account, the deal finalized, closed, and then the money bounced back into the buyer's account, and then he refused to pay it, but he owned the property.
Love that.
Wow,
Next.
that's
Bang.
the story for another podcast. What's the most expensive property you've ever sold?
19.875 million
Where?
in Saint-Jean-Cap-Ferrat.
Any country.
That's in the French Riviera.
Yeah,
The less
I wasn't going to
educated.
ask where that was, but
That's the south of France.
thanks for clarifying.
That's in France.
One country you haven't had a good experience with and you think ultimately need changing the most? And you're only allowed one word answer with this. No justification, one word.
Monaco.
Monaco.
Right, last one. What is your dream country to sell a property in that you haven't yet done? So,
Well, I've sold a property there, but I'm going to cheat a bit. Okay, I've sold a property in Ibiza, many properties in Ibiza, should I say, and I love the place. But my dream has always been to sell a property in Ibiza and then have permission to DJ at the housewarming the next day.
well, ironically, we have a viewing happening on Sunday in
I know,
Ibiza.
I know.
So,
You're going to have to speak to him though and ask him really politely.
Oh,
Even
like
if I just
that-
do a 5-minute set, I
That's-
don't
We'll make it
care.
happen.
I
yeah,
don't
no,
care.
that's like no problem. We can sort that out.
that's a
If we get that
non-negotiable.
deal across the line.
Part of the
I think
contract.
if you manifest something to happen,
Yeah.
it can happen.
Love
Yeah,
that.
they're buying it.
Love that.
Yeah.
Right. Serge, mate, it's been unbelievable. Like,
Oh, stop it.
no, it has though. Like, it's an unbelievable journey. This is why I was looking forward to this podcast. The story's amazing. The journey's amazing. What you've done, where you are now, it's inspirational. And this is what the podcast is about. It's about inspiring people. If this podcast doesn't inspire, then you're the brain
It's
dead.
about thank you for, let me just have the last word. It's about being in a happy space, and at the moment I'm in a happy space.
Amazing. Well, we love being around you. We love being able to work collaboratively with you.
Thank you. It means a
and
lot.
you are an inspiration.
Yeah. So just quickly,
thanks for
where
joining us.
the people that are watching, where are they going to find you?
At Serge Cowan on Instagram, at Serge P Cowan on TikTok, and Serge P Cowan on YouTube.
Perfect.
I think that's
Well,
it,
look,
really.
guys, we hope you have enjoyed this podcast. I certainly have. Thank you, Serge. And we look
you.
forward to seeing you all next time.